The shot cracked through the air. The shot cracked through the air. The bullet whistled past where Josiah's skull had been 1 second before. Then Rosa drew the blade hidden in her sleeve, and everything changed. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how a desperate mail-order bride became the woman who would destroy the most dangerous man in Montana territory. Before we begin, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Now let's go back to where it all started. The wind cut through Montana territory like a blade forged in hell itself. February 1878, and the cold didn't just bite, it devoured. Rosa Ashford stood at the window of the Thunder Creek Ranch cabin, her breath fogging the glass, watching two men hunt wolves in the darkness. She'd been in Montana exactly 6 hours. Already she understood that everything she'd known about survival was a lie. Josiah Blackwood moved through the snow like death incarnate. 6 feet 8 inches of muscle and scar tissue, rifle raised, barely breathing. 200 yards away, a wolf turned its head. The shot cracked the night. The wolf dropped. His brother Ezekiel fought differently. When the alpha charged, Zeke didn't shoot. He dropped the rifle and pulled a hunting knife the size of Rosa's forearm. Man and beast collided in a spray of snow and blood. 30 seconds later, Zeke stood alone, blade dripping, the wolf's body still twitching at his feet. Rosa's hands trembled against the window frame. Not from fear, from something else entirely. Something that made her pulse race and her breath catch, and her body understand what her mind refused to accept. She was alone with two men who killed like breathing. They returned to the cabin carrying wolf pelts, their clothes dark with blood. Josiah's amber eyes found hers through the window. He didn't smile, didn't nod, just looked at her with an intensity that stripped away every defense she'd ever built. When he spoke, his voice rumbled like distant thunder. "Welcome to Thunder Creek, Miss Ashford. Out here, you earn your keep or you do. Which one are you?" Rosa lifted her chin, forcing steel into her voice despite the tremor in her knees. "I choose to live, and I'll prove I'm worth keeping." Josiah's lips curved, not quite a smile, something more dangerous. "We'll see." 6 weeks earlier, Philadelphia had buried her father in frozen ground. Ambrose Ashford, master saddle maker, Union cavalry supplier. Dead at 52 from consumption that hollowed him from the inside until there was nothing left but bones and memories and 2 saddles he'd never finished. Rosa finished them. Her hands knew the work. Her father had taught her from age 12, despite neighbors whispering that craftsmanship was man's work, that a daughter should learn needlepoint and piano, not how to cut rawhide so it held under pressure, how to stitch seams that never failed, how to balance leather so horse and rider moved as one living thing. She'd learned anyway. And now, with her father 6 feet under and the landlord demanding 3 months back rent, those 2 saddles were all she had left in the world. That and a packet of letters from a man named Obadiah Fletcher. They'd corresponded for 8 months. He was 33, owned 160 acres in Montana territory, needed a wife, promised a home and safety, and respect for a woman with skills and spine. His letters were awkward but honest. He didn't speak of love, but he spoke of partnership, of building something real. Rosa had said yes, not because she wanted to marry a stranger, because the alternative was starvation or worse, and in Philadelphia, a woman alone with no family was prey. The train to Chicago took 3 days. The stagecoach through Nebraska and Wyoming took 2 weeks. The final leg to Timber Ridge, Montana took another week through mountain passes that should have killed them twice. When Rosa finally stepped off the coach into Timber Ridge on February 8, 1878, she'd been traveling for 6 weeks. She'd lost 15 pounds. Her honey gold hair had faded under prairie dust. Her navy traveling dress showed every hard mile. But she was alive, and Obadiah Fletcher was waiting. Except he wasn't. The town was smaller than she'd imagined. 300 souls maybe, one main street, buildings that looked temporary like they knew civilization wouldn't last here. The general store, a saloon, a boarding house, a church that doubled as a school. Rosa asked directions to the Fletcher homestead. The storekeeper's face went carefully blank. "Fletcher Place is 20 miles east, but miss, you should talk to Sheriff Calloway first." Something in his tone made Rosa's stomach clench. Sheriff Beauregard Calloway was 50 if he was a day. Gray hair, gray eyes, face worn down by frontier justice until all the softness was gone. He looked at Rosa and sighed like he'd seen this story before and knew how it ended. "You're Rosa Ashford." Not a question. "Yes, I'm looking for Obadiah Fletcher. We're engaged to be married." The sheriff pulled a chair out for her. Rosa sat because her legs suddenly couldn't hold her weight. "Miss Ashford, Obadiah Fletcher is dead. Been dead 3 months. Shot November 15th, 1877. 3 bullets to the back of the head. Execution style." The room tilted. Rosa gripped the chair arms until her knuckles went white. "Who killed him?" "Can't prove it, but everyone knows. Vanderbilt Rutledge, richest man in the territory, owns the lumber operation, cattle ranches, half the businesses in 3 counties. He wanted Fletcher's land. When Fletcher wouldn't sell, he died. When Fletcher died with no kin, the land reverted to public domain. Rutledge bought it for pennies." Rosa stared at the floor. 6 weeks traveling. Everything she owned in a single carpet bag. 2 saddles worth $80 if she was lucky. And the man who'd promised her a future was 3 months in the ground. "So I'm a widow before I was ever a bride." "Yes, ma'am, I'm sorry." Sorry didn't feed her. Sorry didn't shelter her. Sorry didn't change the fact that she was alone in a territory where women without protection disappeared. Rosa stood. Her legs held this time. "Where's the nearest place selling saddles?" The sheriff blinked. "General store, I suppose." "Why, someone?" "Because I have 2 to sell, and I need to eat." Jeremiah Creed's general store smelled of coffee and sawdust and unwashed bodies packed too close during winter. Rosa set the saddles on the counter with a heavy thud that silenced the low murmur of men near the stove. She waited. Creed made her wait. It was a power play she recognized. Keep the desperate woman standing. Remind her that her time didn't matter and her desperation did. Finally, he looked up. His gaze moved over her face with clinical assessment. Not quite young enough. Not quite pretty enough. Blonde hair faded, blue eyes too large and a face gone thin. A dress that used to be quality, but now showed every mile. Then his eyes moved to the saddles and something shifted. Not interest. Calculation. "Make these yourself." "My father made them. I finished them after he died." Creed lifted one saddle, turned it over, examined the underside. Rosa watched his face, trying to read what he saw. The double-reinforced rawhide. The angled stirrup. The pommel weighted slightly forward to improve balance. All the small details that separated good work from masterwork. "Nice enough, but saddles are common goods. Got 3 in the back already. Don't need more." Rosa knew it was a lie. She'd asked about saddles at the stage depot, at the boarding house, at the livery. Everyone in Timber Ridge needed saddles. Quality leather work was scarce enough that most riders made do with gear that failed after one season. But challenging him would accomplish nothing. "What would you offer?" $5 each, 10 total. The saddles were worth $50 each minimum. Her father's work had commanded 75 in Philadelphia, and these were built to the same standard. But Philadelphia was 2,000 miles away. Her father was 6 months dead, and the man who was supposed to make her his wife had vanished, leaving her stranded with nowhere to go. Rosa opened her mouth to accept, to take the $10 and pray it lasted long enough to find work, to survive. The door opened. Wind rushed in, bringing snow and cold, and a man who filled the doorway like a landslide fills a canyon. The conversation around the stove died instantly. Rosa turned and had to tilt her head back to see his face. Her first impression wasn't of features. It was of scale. He was easily 6'8", maybe taller, with shoulders so broad they blocked the pale winter light from the street. His coat hung open despite the cold, revealing a chest and arms that belonged to a man who lifted logs and broke horses and built his life from raw strength. But it was his hands that caught her attention as he stripped off his gloves. Massive, scarred across the knuckles, calloused in ways that spoke of work that would break softer men. When he set those hands on the counter beside her saddles, one on either side, close enough that she could feel the heat of him through the winter air, Rosa understood with sudden clarity that she'd been negotiating with the wrong kind of power. Jeremiah Creed's face went carefully blank. Not afraid exactly, but wary the way animals become wary when a larger predator enters their territory. The man didn't look at Rosa, his attention fixed on the saddle with an intensity that felt almost physical. When he lifted it, his movements were surprisingly gentle, testing the weight distribution, running his fingers along the stitching with the practiced touch of someone who knew exactly what he was examining. Double reinforced rawhide. His voice was deep enough that Rosa felt it in her chest. Angled stirrup for long-distance comfort. Custom pommel balance. He set the saddle down exactly where it had been. Then finally he looked at her. His eyes were an unusual shade of amber that seemed to catch and hold the lamplight. They moved over her face with the same thorough assessment he'd given the saddle, and Rosa felt suddenly exposed as if he could see past her threadbare dress and desperate pride to the terrified girl underneath. "This is Ambrose Ashford's work." Not a question. Rosa's breath caught. "You knew my father bought 3 saddles from him in '73. Army needed gear for campaign conditions. His were the only ones that lasted." His eyes, that strange, burning amber, studied her with unnerving focus. "You're his daughter." Again, not a question. "Yes." The word came out smaller than she intended. This close, she could smell him. Leather and cedarwood and clean sweat. The scent of a man who worked outdoors in all weather and washed with harsh lye soap that left skin rough. "You make these." "I finish them. He taught me." The man's jaw tightened, some decision being made behind those amber eyes. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a worn leather wallet. He counted bills onto the counter with deliberate precision. 20, 30, 40. Jeremiah Creed's eyes widened. 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. "I'm taking both saddles." His voice held no room for argument. "And I'm hiring you to maintain them in the rest of my gear at Thunder Creek Ranch. $60 a month plus room and board." Rosa stared at the money. $100. More than she'd seen in 6 months. Enough to live on for half a year if she was careful. "Hire me," her voice sounded strange in her own ears. "I run a horse ranch 40 miles north. Need someone who understands leatherwork. You know what you're doing." Something in his tone, the way he asked it, not as doubt but as confirmation, made Rosa's spine straighten. "Better than anyone in this town." The corner of his mouth twitched. Might have been a smile. Hard to tell. "Then you're coming with me. Get your things." Jeremiah started to protest. The man turned his head just slightly, and whatever Jeremiah saw in those amber eyes made him swallow his words. "Now," the man said to Rosa, and it was not a request. Rosa's hands trembled as she gathered the money. $100 felt like a fortune and a trap at the same time. She looked up at this stranger who had just bought her work for fair value and hired her without references, and tried to read his intentions. "What's your name?" "Josiah Blackwood." He picked up both saddles as if they weighed nothing. "And you're Rosa Ashford. Your father talked about you in his letters. Said you had his hands for the craft." He paused. "He wrote 3 letters over the years. Last one mentioned he was teaching his daughter. Said you'd be better than him someday if you kept at it." Something hot and sharp twisted in Rosa's chest. Her father had been proud of her, had told people, had believed she would surpass him, and she'd never known. She followed Josiah Blackwood out into the February cold, leaving Jeremiah Creed fuming behind his counter, and wondered if she was walking towards salvation or something far more dangerous. The wagon was built for work, not comfort. Heavy wood reinforced with iron brackets designed to haul supplies over mountain roads that would destroy lighter vehicles. 2 horses stood patient in their traces, breath steaming in the cold air. Josiah loaded the saddles into the wagon bed with care, positioning them so they wouldn't shift during travel. Then he climbed onto the bench and looked down at Rosa waiting. She hesitated. This was the moment she could take her $100 and find a boarding house, could look for other work, could stay in Timber Ridge, where at least there were people and laws and some semblance of civilization, or she could climb onto this wagon with a strange man who was taking her 40 miles into the wilderness. Josiah didn't rush her, didn't make promises or assurances, just waited with the patience of a man who knew how to let prey come to him. Rosa thought about her options. $100 would last maybe 4 months in Timber Ridge. Then what? She had no references, no family, no husband. In a frontier town, a woman alone with no protection was prey. At least at Thunder Creek Ranch, she would be earning her keep, would be valued for her skill. She climbed onto the wagon. Josiah made a sound that might have been approval. He clicked to the horses and they started moving wheels crunching through snow-packed streets. Within minutes, Timber Ridge was behind them, and Rosa was alone with a man she didn't know heading toward a place she'd never seen. The silence stretched between them, heavy with things unsaid. Rosa sat as far from Josiah as the narrow bench allowed, but she couldn't escape his presence. He was simply too large. His shoulder was only inches from hers. His thigh, thick with muscle beneath heavy canvas pants, nearly brushed her skirt when the wagon hit a rut. She had never been this close to a man before. Never sat beside one. Never felt the heat of a male body through winter air. Never been so aware of the sheer physical difference between them. Josiah Blackwood made her feel small in a way that was both frightening and strangely compelling. The road narrowed as they left civilization behind, climbing into hills covered with pine and aspen. Snow lay thick here, pristine and beautiful and deadly if you weren't prepared for it. How did you really know my father? Rosa's curiosity overcame her nervousness. Told you, Army contract in '73. You were a soldier, scout. His jaw tightened. Indian Wars. Don't like talking about it. The flat finality in his voice told her that particular door was closed. Rosa filed the information away. Josiah Blackwood had seen violence, had perhaps done violence. It explained the scars on his hands, the way he moved with contained readiness, like a wolf that could go from stillness to attack in a heartbeat. They rode in silence for another mile before Rosa noticed the harness strap starting to fray. The leather was old, stressed from cold and weight, and the threads were separating where the strap connected to the rigging. Stop, Josiah reined in immediately, no questions. What? Rosa pointed. The strap, it's failing. Another 10 minutes and it would have broken. Josiah climbed down to examine it. His hands moved over the leather with practiced efficiency, confirming what she'd seen. He looked at her differently then, reassessing. Good eye. You always notice things before they break. My father taught me that prevention is cheaper than repair. Smart man. Josiah pulled tools from under the seat and began repairing the strap. I'm sorry he's gone. The simple condolence, spoken without flourish or false sentiment, hit harder than elaborate sympathy would have. Rosa blinked back tears she'd been holding for 6 months. Thank you. They worked together to finish the repair, Rosa handing him tools, Josiah accepting them without comment. Once their hands touched, as she passed him the awl, and Rosa jerked back as if burned. Josiah noticed but said nothing. When they climbed back onto the wagon, Rosa was acutely aware that something had shifted. Josiah had tested her, and she had proven her worth. In his world, that seemed to matter more than pretty words or social graces. The sun was lowering behind the mountains when Thunder Creek Ranch finally came into view. It wasn't what Rosa had expected. The main house was solid, built from logs that had been fitted together with skill, designed to withstand mountain winters. A barn large enough to stable a dozen horses stood nearby. Corrals, outbuildings, pastures that would be green in summer but now lay under snow. And chopping wood near the barn was another man. He was shirtless despite the cold, his torso gleaming with sweat as he brought an axe down in powerful rhythmic strokes. Muscles flexed and bunched with each swing. His build was nearly identical to Josiah's massive shoulders tapering to a narrow waist, arms thick as tree branches, chest and abdomen carved into definition that spoke of brutal physical labor. He stopped mid-swing as the wagon approached, and Rosa saw his face for the first time. Younger than Josiah by a few years. Auburn hair instead of chestnut, eyes the color of whiskey instead of amber. But the bone structure was unmistakable. Brothers. The younger man's eyes locked onto Rosa with an intensity that made her breath catch. He stared at her the way a starving man stares at a feast, and something primitive in her hindbrain recognized danger. Josiah brought the wagon to a stop. Zeke. Zeke set down the axe, still staring at Rosa. Who's this saddle maker? Ambrose Ashford's daughter from Philadelphia. Hired help. Zeke's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Didn't know we were hiring girls. Josiah's voice went hard. She's skilled labor. Treat her accordingly. Zeke walked toward the wagon with predatory grace. Up close, Rosa could see the scar that cut across his chest, white and puckered, a knife wound, old but deep. He stopped beside her, looking up with eyes that saw too much. Welcome to Thunder Creek, Miss Ashford. His voice was rougher than Josiah's, with an edge that suggested barely controlled wildness. Hope you know what you're getting into. I'm here to work, Rosa said, trying to sound confident. Zeke's grin widened. We'll see about that. Josiah's hand clamped down on Zeke's shoulder hard enough to make the younger man wince. Inside, now, we need to talk. The cabin's interior was sparse but clean, a main room with a stone fireplace, a kitchen area, a table built from solid oak that could seat 6. 2 doors led to what Rosa assumed were bedrooms. Josiah pointed to the smaller door. That's yours, locked from the inside. Where will you sleep? Zeke answered before Josiah could. Right outside your door, sweetheart. You need anything in the night, just holler. Josiah shot his brother a look that could have cut glass. What Zeke means is that we sleep in the main bedroom. You'll have privacy. Rosa set down her bag, feeling the weight of both men's attention. Will I be safe here? Josiah met her eyes steadily. From everyone except the 2 of us. And we won't touch you unless you want us to, you. The qualifications sent a shiver down Rosa's spine. Unless you want us to, as if it was inevitable that she would eventually want them to touch her. I'll make dinner, she said, needing something to do with her hands, some way to earn her keep. You don't have to, Josiah said. I want to. Zeke grinned. I like her already. Rosa found supplies in the kitchen. Flour beans, salt pork, dried vegetables. Basic ingredients for basic food. She put together a stew while Josiah and Zeke disappeared to tend the horses and put away the saddles. The domestic task calmed her, gave her something familiar to focus on while her mind raced. She was in the middle of nowhere with 2 men she didn't know. She had $100 and no way to leave until spring. She was completely dependent on their goodwill. And some traitorous part of her brain kept replaying the image of Zeke swinging that axe muscles moving beneath sweat-slicked skin. Dinner was quiet at first. The men ate with focused efficiency of people who burned enormous calories every day and needed fuel more than flavor. Rosa picked at her food, too nervous to have much appetite. Zeke broke the silence. When's the last time we had a woman here, Josiah? 8 years, and she left after 2 weeks. Zeke looked at Rosa. Don't worry, we've learned to be more accommodating since then. The way he said accommodating made it sound like a threat and a promise. Josiah set down his fork, his voice taking on an authoritative tone that made Rosa straighten in her chair. Rules, you work, you earn your keep. No charity here. I don't want charity. Good. Second, you don't leave this property without escort. Montana in winter is deadly. Wolves, bears, weather. And worse. Worse. Men who wouldn't think twice about hurting a woman alone. Third, Josiah continued, you lock your door every night, every single night. Rosa's heart hammered. Are you dangerous? Josiah's amber eyes held hers. To anyone who threatens what's mine, but not to you. He paused. Unless you want me to be. The air in the room seemed to thicken. Zeke watched the exchange with obvious interest, his whiskey eyes moving between Josiah and Rosa like he was watching a chess match. And if either of us makes you uncomfortable, Josiah finished, you tell me immediately. Understood. Understood. After dinner, Rosa retreated to her room. It was small but adequate. A narrow bed, a chest for clothes, a window that looked out over snow-covered pastures, and a sturdy lock on the door. She could hear Josiah and Zeke talking in the main room, their voices too low to make out words, but the tone clear enough. They were arguing. Rosa pressed her ear to the door, shameless in her need to know what they were saying. Zeke's voice rose first. Why'd you bring her here? She's going to cause problems. We need help with the horses. She's skilled. Bullshit. Zeke's voice dripped skepticism. You want her. I can see it in the way you look at her. Watch yourself. I want her too. So what's the plan, brother? We share her like we share everything else. A long silence. Then Josiah's voice so quiet Rosa almost missed it. Maybe. Rosa's breath caught. Her heart pounded so hard she was sure they could hear it through the door. Share her. Like property. Like one more thing they owned together. She should have been outraged, horrified, should have been planning her escape. Instead, she found herself imagining what that would mean. 2 men, both of them touching her, both of them wanting her. She had never even been kissed, and she was imagining things that made her face burn with shame and something darker. Rosa climbed into bed, still dressed, and pulled the blanket up to her chin. Through the window, stars blazed in a sky unmarred by city lights, beautiful and cold, and utterly indifferent to human struggles. She closed her eyes and tried to sleep, but every sound made her tense. Footsteps in the main room, the creak of floorboards, the low murmur of male voices. Tomorrow she would start work, would prove her value, would figure out how to survive in this strange place with these dangerous men. For tonight, she just had to make it until morning. But as she lay there in the darkness, listening to the sounds of Thunder Creek settling around her, Rosa couldn't shake the feeling that she'd crossed a threshold she could never step back through. She'd come to Montana looking for safety. Instead, she'd found two men who looked at her like she was something worth claiming. And God help her, some part of her wanted to be claimed. The next day began before dawn. Rosa woke to the sound of someone moving in the kitchen, the smell of coffee brewing. She dressed quickly in her work clothes, a simple cotton dress that had belonged to her mother, and emerged to find Josiah already up. He looked at her, taking in her appearance with a thoroughness that made her self-conscious. "Those will get ruined in the barn. You need proper work clothes. I don't have any others." "We'll fix that." He poured her coffee without asking if she wanted any. "Zeke's checking the north pasture. I'll show you the barn." The barn was well maintained and organized. 8 horses in stalls, their gear hanging on the walls. Most of the saddles were in decent condition, but several showed serious wear. Cracked leather, failing stitches, uneven weight distribution that would cause sores on the horses' backs. Josiah watched as Rosa moved from saddle to saddle, examining each with professional focus. When she finally turned to him, she had a mental list of priorities. "I can fix all of these, but I'll need materials. Rawhide thread needles, oil for conditioning, and time. Take what you need." Josiah gestured to a well-stocked storage area. "And take all the time necessary. I'd rather have quality work than fast work." Rosa set up a workspace in the corner of the barn where natural light came through the loft opening. She spread out her father's tools, each one familiar and comforting. The awl Ambrose had taught her to use when she was 12. The curved needle he'd made himself from spring steel. The stone he'd used to sharpen his knives to a perfect edge. She lost herself in work the way she always had. Leather was honest. It responded to skill and patience. It didn't lie or manipulate. If you treated it right, it would last decades. If you rushed or cut corners, it would fail. Rosa was so focused that she didn't hear Zeke enter the barn. Didn't know he was there until his voice came from directly behind her. "You really are good at this." She jumped, dropping her awl. It clattered against the floor. "You scared me." Zeke grinned, not looking sorry at all. "Just wanted to see what all the fuss was about." "Never seen a woman work leather like that." Rosa bent to retrieve her tool, acutely aware that Zeke was standing close. Too close. She could feel the heat of him, could smell sweat and pine sap and something distinctly male. "My father taught me that precision matters more than strength." Smart man. Zeke moved even closer, and Rosa found herself backed against the work table with nowhere to go. "You're not what I expected when Josiah brought you here." "What did you expect?" "Someone weaker, someone who'd need constant protecting." He reached out, not quite touching her, but close enough that she could feel the movement of air. "But you're strong. That's attractive." Rosa's heart raced. She pressed back against the table, trying to create distance. "I'm here to work Mr. Blackwood." "Zeke." His eyes, that whiskey color, were intense. "And I know why you're here. Question is, do you... What's that supposed to mean?" Before Zeke could answer, Josiah's voice cut through the barn like a whip crack. "Zeke, out, now." The two brothers stared at each other, and Rosa saw the tension between them. The unspoken challenge. Finally, Zeke stepped back deliberately, bumping Josiah's shoulder as he passed. After Zeke left, Josiah turned to Rosa. "Did he touch you?" "No, just talked." "If he does touch you without your permission, you tell me immediately." Rosa found her courage. "Why do you care so much?" Josiah stepped closer, and Rosa realized that his proximity felt different from Zeke's. Less predatory, but somehow more intense. "Because you're under my protection now. That means something." "Is that all I am? Someone you're protecting?" Josiah's hand rose, almost touching her face before he stopped himself. "No, you're more than that. But I'm trying to give you time to figure out what you want." "What I want. From this, from us, from life out here." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Rosa's breath came faster. "You came here looking for a husband." Josiah said, his voice low. "You found death instead." but maybe you found something else too. Something better. What are you asking me? Nothing? Not yet. Work today, learn this place, learn us, and in a week we'll talk about your future. He left before Rosa could respond, and she stood there trembling, understanding that whatever was happening here was bigger than a trial, bigger than safety, bigger than anything she'd imagined when she stepped off that stagecoach. The afternoon passed in focused work. Rosa repaired 3 saddles, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. She was examining the fourth when hoofbeats approached the ranch. Through the barn door, she saw riders coming, not friendly visitors. There was something in the way they moved, deliberate, aggressive, that made her pulse quicken. Josiah emerged from the cabin, Winchester in hand. Zeke appeared from the corral, positioning himself to flank the visitors. 3 men. The leader was older, maybe 40, with expensive clothes and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Behind him rode 2 rough-looking men who had the air of hired muscle. The leader dismounted with practiced ease. His gaze swept the property before landing on Rosa standing in the barn doorway. His eyes lingered on her in a way that made her skin crawl. Josiah Blackwood. The man's voice was smooth, educated. Heard you had a visitor from back east. Thought I'd come by and be neighborly. She's hired help, Josiah said flatly. Not your concern, Rutledge. So this was Vanderbilt Rutledge, the man who'd killed Obadiah Fletcher. Rosa felt her hands clench into fists. Rutledge ignored Josiah, addressing Rosa directly. You must be the young lady everyone in Timber Ridge is talking about. Miss Ashford, isn't it? Pretty thing, all alone with 2 bachelors in the wilderness. He shook his head with false concern. Doesn't seem proper. I'm fine where I am, Rosa said, forcing strength into her voice. Are you? Rutledge stepped closer, and Josiah moved to block him. 2 men, no other women for 40 miles. No one to hear if you scream. He smiled. I worry about you, miss. A young woman needs proper protection. Safe employment. She has both, Zeke said, his hand resting on the knife at his belt. I run the lumber operation. Rutledge continued as if Zeke hadn't spoken. Clean work, good pay, respectable. Much better than this. He gestured dismissively at the ranch. I said, I'm fine. Rutledge's expression hardened slightly. You should think carefully about your options, Miss Ashford. Frontier life is unpredictable, dangerous. Men like the Blackwoods make enemies. Is that a threat? Josiah's hand was on his revolver now. Just a fact. Rutledge remounted his horse, but his eyes never left Rosa. I also heard something interesting, Blackwood. You're trying for that homestead extension. The one that requires a settled family. He looked at Rosa with calculating sighs. Is this girl your solution? Josiah said nothing, which was answer enough. Rutledge's smile widened. How convenient. Well, I wish you luck with your claim. Be a shame if something happened to prevent it from going through. He tipped his hat to Rosa. Miss Ashford, if things don't work out here, you know where to find me. After Rutledge and his men left, the silence in the yard was thick with tension. Who was that? Rosa asked, though she already knew. Vanderbilt Rutledge owns the lumber operation and half the businesses in Timber Ridge. He wants this land. Why do you call? Silver, there's a vein that runs through the northern pasture, not huge but valuable. If I lose my homestead, claim the land reverts to public domain. Rutledge can file a mining claim and push me out. And you need a wife to keep the claim. Yes, Rosa looked between the 2 brothers, pieces falling into place. So I really am just convenient. Josiah turned to face her fully. No, because if all I needed was a wife, I would have found one months ago. His amber eyes burned. I need a wife I can actually stand being married to, one who won't run screaming when things get hard, one who contributes instead of just taking, and one I can trust not to betray me to men like Rutledge. How do you know you can trust me? Because your father trusted me enough to write me letters, to tell me about his daughter who had his gift for the craft, and because I watched you turn down Rutledge's offer without hesitation. Josiah stepped closer. You could have gone with him. Rich man, comfortable life in town, but you chose to stay here. I didn't choose anything. I'm trapped. Are you? Josiah's voice dropped to something dangerous and compelling. Door's not locked. You've got $100. Town's only 40 miles. You could leave tomorrow if you wanted. He was right. She wasn't literally trapped. She was making a choice. So what happens now? Rosa asked. Now we work. We learn each other, and in a week we have a conversation about the future. That night, Rosa lay in her bed listening to the sounds of the ranch settling. She thought about Philadelphia, about her father, about Obadiah Fletcher lying dead in frozen ground. She thought about Rutledge's calculating eyes and Josiah's amber gaze and Zeke's wild intensity. Most of all, she thought about the question Josiah had asked her. What did she want? Safety? She'd never really had that comfort that had failed her before. What she wanted Rosa realized in the darkness was to matter, to be valued not despite her strength, but because of it. And these two dangerous men offered exactly that. The next 5 days passed in a blur of work and discovery. Josiah taught her to shoot, not the polite target practice of Philadelphia ladies, but real shooting, combat shooting, survival shooting. In 40 miles, there's no law, he said, standing behind her, his large hands guiding her grip on the Colt 45. You have to protect yourself. The gun was heavy, cold, lethal. Rosa's first shots went wide. But Josiah was patient, adjusting her stance, teaching her to breathe, to squeeze instead of pull, to keep her eyes on the target. After 2 hours and 50 rounds, Rosa hit 7 out of 10 tin cans from 50 feet. Josiah nodded. Steady hands. Good craftsmen usually make good marksmen. You'll survive. Zeke taught her to ride, not side saddle like a Philadelphia lady, but astride like a frontiersman. No proper saddle, just a blanket and rope. Philadelphia girls ride like ladies, he said, grinning as she struggled to stay mounted. Montana girls ride like warriors. Rosa fell 7 times, got up 7 times. By the end of the day, she was covered in dust and bruises, but she could stay mounted at a full gallop. Stubborn, Zeke observed with approval. Stubbornness keeps you alive longer than fear. In the barn, Rosa repaired saddles with meticulous care, each stitch placed precisely, each piece of leather cut and shaped to perfection. She wasn't just fixing equipment. She was proving her worth with every completed piece. On the 4th day, Josiah tested the new saddle she'd designed for his warhorse. He rode hard through rough terrain, pushing both animal and gear to their limits. When he returned, he examined every inch of the saddle before looking at Rosa. Better than anything I've ever used. You're worth more than the $100 I paid. Zeke added with a grin, worth a lot more than that. By the 6th day, Rosa had made a decision. She just needed the courage to say it out loud. That evening, as she worked in the barn, she heard horses approaching again. Multiple riders, her stomach clenched with dread. Rutledge had returned, this time with 8 men. Josiah and Zeke both stepped outside, weapons ready. Rosa stayed in the barn doorway, but her hand found the small knife Zeke had given her for leather work. Rutledge dismounted, his confidence bordering on arrogance. Miss Ashford? He completely ignored the brothers. I wanted to make you one final offer before you make what might be a terrible mistake. I'm not interested. Hear me out. Rutledge's voice took on a persuasive tone. I know you're considering marrying these men, maybe both of them if the rumors are true. He shook his head. But you deserve better. Come work for me. $120 a month. Your own house in town. Safety. Respectability. No, thank you. Rutledge's expression hardened. You're making a mistake. These men are dangerous. Did they tell you about the Army investigation, about what they did during the war? That's got nothing to do with now, Josiah growled. Doesn't it? Rutledge looked at Rosa. Ask them about Fort Defiance. Ask them what happened to the prisoners they were supposed to guard. Get off my land. Josiah's hand went to his gun. Rutledge raised his hands in mock surrender. I'm leaving, but Miss Ashford, I want you to know something. He paused for effect. Obadiah Fletcher didn't die by accident, and the men who killed him are still out here. The implication hung in the air like poison. After Rutledge left, Rosa turned to Josiah. What did he mean? What happened at Fort Defiance? Josiah's face was stone. Fort Defiance was 2 years ago. What we did there, we did under orders. Or rather, what we refused to do. Tell me. They went inside, sat at the oak table, and Josiah told her the truth. 1876. We were Army scouts at Fort Defiance in Wyoming Territory. After the Battle of Little Bighorn, the Army rounded up 300 Lakota and Cheyenne prisoners, mostly women, children, elderly, wounded warriors. The conditions were terrible. Not enough food, no medicine, middle of winter. Zeke took over the story, his voice rough with memory. Our commanding officer, Colonel Abernathy, gave an order. Any prisoner who tried to escape was to be shot to kill. No warning, no mercy. January 9th, 1877. Josiah continued. 60 prisoners tried to escape. They knew they'd die in the fort, so they chose to die trying to get home. The colonel ordered all scouts to fire. We refused, Zeke said simply. 20 men obeyed the order. Josiah's jaw tightened. We didn't. I stood in their path and let them run. Zeke fired into the air to warn them. We helped 40 people escape. 20 others were killed by the soldiers who followed orders. The army wanted to court-martial us for disobeying orders in wartime, Zeke added. But the story leaked to the Eastern newspapers. Public outrage forced them to discharge us instead. Dishonorable discharge. Labeled as traitors. Rosa felt tears prick her eyes. You're not traitors. You're heroes. You chose humanity over orders. The world doesn't see it that way, Josiah said quietly, and Rutledge will use it against us in court. Proof that we're not fit to own land. Rosa stood, decision crystallizing. I don't need 7 days. I've decided. Both men went still. Option 3, I'll be wife to both of you. Josiah's eyes widened. You're sure once you say yes, there's no going back? I'm sure, not because I'm desperate, not because I have no choice, but because I respect men who are strong enough to do what's right when it's hardest. Rosa's voice grew stronger. And because I want to build a life with people who are worthy of respect, not people who are just proper. Zeke's grin was enormous. Welcome to the Blackwood family, Rosa. We'll need to make it legal, Josiah said, but there was relief in his voice. Judge Whitmore can come from Helena. We marry you and me legally, and then we figure out the rest together. Together, Rosa repeated. All 3 of us. The wedding happened 2 days later. Judge Cornelius Whitmore arrived at Thunder Creek Ranch on a cold February morning. He was an older man weathered by frontier justice, but with sharp eyes that missed nothing. He looked at Rosa standing between the 2 brothers and asked directly, Miss, are you sure about this? Rosa met his gaze without flinching. More sure than I've been about anything in my life, Your Honor. The ceremony was brief, functional, stripped of romantic flourishes. Judge Whitmore asked the required questions. Josiah answered in his deep, commanding voice. Rosa's responses came quieter, but no less certain. When it came time for the vows, Josiah took both her hands in his. I vow to protect you with my life, to provide for you with everything I have, to respect your strength and never diminish it. His amber eyes burned into hers, and to make you mine in every way that matters. Rosa's voice shook as she spoke her own vows. I vow to be your partner, not your burden, to contribute my skills and my labor, to stand beside you, not behind you. She paused, then added words that weren't in any ceremony she'd ever heard. And to trust you with parts of myself I've never given anyone. Zeke stood witness, his whiskey eyes locked on Rosa with an intensity that made her breath catch. By the power vested in me by Montana Territory, Judge Whitmore intoned, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride. Josiah's kiss was possessive, acclaiming, a brand of ownership that said mine to everyone watching. His hand cupped the back of her head, angling her face so he could take her mouth thoroughly, completely. When he finally released her, Rosa was dizzy. After Judge Whitmore left with the signed marriage certificate, Zeke locked the cabin door with deliberate slowness. The sound of the bolt sliding home echoed through the room like a gunshot. Josiah poured 3 glasses of whiskey. To new beginnings. They drank in silence. The liquid burned down Rosa's throat, making her head swim and her courage rise. Zeke set down his glass. So now you're legally Josiah's wife. Yes. But you agreed to belong to both of us. Yes. Zeke moved closer, predatory and purposeful. Then it's time we made that official too. That night, Rosa understood what it meant to belong to 2 mountain men. Not as possession, but as partnership. Not as submission, but as union. 3 people becoming 1 unit in work, in danger, in life, in everything that mattered. The details were private, sacred. But when morning came, Rosa woke between them feeling fundamentally changed. Her eyes were brighter, her shoulders straighter. She walked with new confidence. Zeke teased her over breakfast. How do you feel, Mrs. Blackwood? Rosa smiled. Like I finally found where I belong. 3 weeks of peace followed. Rosa established her workshop in the barn. Orders came from ranchers within 100 miles. Her reputation grew the best saddle maker in Montana Territory. Josiah and Zeke taught her everything they knew. Advanced shooting with rifle, pistol, and shotgun. Hunting and tracking. Survival skills for fire, water, and shelter. Even basic hand-to-hand combat. Rosa transformed from Philadelphia girl to mountain woman. But peace never lasted on the frontier. March 10th, 1878. Deep night. Rosa woke to the smell of smoke. She ran to the window. The barn was burning. Huge flames reaching toward the sky, consuming everything. Josiah and Zeke were already moving, pulling on pants with military efficiency. Rosa did not stay in the cabin. She grabbed a rifle and followed. 8 men on horseback stood on the hill overlooking the ranch, silhouetted against the fire. Rutledge sat his mount like a general surveying a battlefield. His voice carried across the distance. Blackwood, this is a warning. Drop your homestead claim, or next time it's the cabin with you and your wife inside. Rosa didn't think. She raised the rifle, aimed carefully, and fired. The bullet whistled past Rutledge's hat, knocking it off his head. Rutledge stared in shock. That girl just shot at me. Rosa reloaded, aimed again. That was a warning. Next one's through your head. Josiah called out, Rutledge, this is war. Not war, Blackwood, business. I want the land. You don't have a real family, just a charade with that girl. The court will prove it. 3 months until trial, Zeke shouted back. In that time, if you come near our land, I'll kill you. Sheriff Calloway arrived too late, after Rutledge had gone. No evidence, no proof. He spoke quietly to Josiah. I know he did it, but I need evidence, or you handle it yourself and I look the other way. The barn was a total loss. 80% of Rosa's equipment gone. Her father's tools melted or burned beyond recognition. The saddles she'd been working on destroyed. Rosa stood in front of the smoking ruins and felt something harden in her chest. Rutledge had taken her father's legacy, the last physical connection to Ambrose Ashford. Josiah held her tight. I won't let him hurt you. Rosa looked up at him, then at Zeke standing beside them. We won't let him win. We fight together. That night, lying between her 2 husbands, Rosa made a silent vow. Rutledge thought she was their weakness. He was wrong. She would be their strength, and together they would destroy him. The war had begun, and Rosa Blackwood was ready to fight. 2 days after the barn burned, Sheriff Beauregard Calloway rode back to Thunder Creek Ranch with a proposition. He sat at the oak table across from Josiah, Zeke, and Rosa, his weathered face grave. We need to catch Rutledge doing something provably illegal. Not arson, he's too careful to leave evidence. But if he tries something more direct, something we can witness. The sheriff looked at Rosa. Men like Rutledge, they get cocky, they overreach. Rosa understood immediately. You want to use me as bait? No, Josiah's voice was flat final. It's the only way, Rosa insisted. Rutledge thinks I'm your weakness. Let's make it his mistake. Zeke leaned forward. What are you proposing, Sheriff? Rosa goes to town, acts frightened, uncertain, like she's considering leaving the Blackwoods. Word will spread, it always does. Rutledge will see an opportunity. He'll try to rescue her. Calloway's eyes were hard. And when he does, we'll be there. Too dangerous, Josiah said. Rosa put her hand over his. More dangerous than losing everything. I'm not porcelain, Josiah. I'm your wife. Let me fight. The 2 brothers exchanged one of their wordless communications. Finally, Josiah nodded, though his jaw was clenched tight. She's right. Rutledge thinks she's weakness. We make it his trap. They spent the next day planning. Rosa would go to Timber Ridge on March 14th. She would visit the boarding house, ask about rooms, look defeated and scared. The gossip would spread like wildfire. Josiah, Zeke, and Sheriff Calloway would position themselves around town, hidden but ready. The night before, Josiah taught Rosa one final lesson. If Rutledge touches you and we can't reach you in time, he pulled a small blade from his boot, no longer than her palm but wickedly sharp. This goes in your sleeve, like this. He showed her how to conceal it, how to draw it quickly, where to strike for maximum damage. Zeke added grimly, if you have to kill him, don't hesitate. The frontier doesn't forgive mercy in the wrong moment. Rosa practiced the motion until it was muscle memory. Draw, strike, lethal efficiency. I won't freeze, she promised. That night, lying between them in the darkness, Rosa felt their fear for her like a physical presence. Josiah's arm was tight around her waist. Zeke's hand rested over her heart, feeling it beat. We'll be there, Josiah whispered. But if something goes wrong, it won't. If it does, you fight like hell. You survive. You hear me? I hear you. March 14th arrived cold and clear, Rosa dressed in her traveling dress, the one she'd arrived in. It made her look more like the desperate bride she'd been, less like the mountain woman she'd become. The small blade was secure in her sleeve. Josiah drove her to town in the wagon. Zeke followed on horseback, staying far enough back to avoid suspicion. At the edge of Timber Ridge, Josiah stopped. Last chance to change your mind. Rosa kissed him once, fierce and quick. I'll see you soon. She climbed down and walked into town alone. The performance began. Rosa went to the boarding house first. Mrs. Henderson, the proprietor, was a gossip of legendary efficiency. I need to ask about rooms, Rosa said, making her voice uncertain, frightened. I'm not sure I can stay at Thunder Creek anymore. The fire, the danger, it's too much. Mrs. Henderson's eyes gleamed with the hunger for news. Oh, my dear, I heard about the barn. Terrible business. Of course you're frightened. A young woman alone with those men, all that violence. They've been good to me, Rosa said quickly, then added with perfect timing. But I don't know if it's enough. Mr. Rutledge offered me work once. Safe work. Maybe I should have listened. Mrs. Henderson practically vibrated with the need to spread this information. Well, if you need a room, dear, I have one available, $10 a week. Thank you. I'll think about it. Rosa visited 2 more shops, letting similar information slip. Each time she saw the calculation in people's eyes. The Blackwood bride was having second thoughts. The marriage was failing. Rutledge had been right all along. By noon, the entire town knew. Rosa sat outside the boarding house on a wooden bench waiting, playing the part of a woman who didn't know what to do next. Lost. Vulnerable. It took 3 hours. Vanderbilt Rutledge appeared as if summoned, riding down the main street with the confidence of a man who owned everything he surveyed. He dismounted and approached Rosa with concern painted across his face. Miss Ashford, he caught himself. My apologies, Mrs. Blackwood. I heard you were in town. Are you well? Rosa looked up at him, letting fear show in her eyes. It wasn't entirely acting. Mr. Rutledge, I don't know what I'm doing. May I sit? She nodded. He sat beside her, close but not touching. A gentleman showing concern. I heard about the fire, terrible tragedy. You must have been so frightened. I was. I am. I don't know if I can live like this. It's so dangerous. Rutledge's voice was soothing, practiced. Of course it is. You're a civilized woman, Miss Ashford. You weren't meant for this brutality. Come with me now. I have a house in town. Safe, comfortable. You can work for me, earn good money, be protected. I should tell them I'm leaving. Rutledge's hand shot out, gripping her wrist. Not hard yet, but firm. No, they won't let you go. Blackwood needs you for his homestead claim. If you tell him, he'll stop you. We need to leave now. Rosa tried to pull away and his grip tightened. The mask was slipping. Mr. Rutledge, you're hurting me. Come with me now, or you'll regret it. Rosa stopped struggling, looked directly into his eyes and spoke clearly. Is that a threat? It's reality. I didn't come this far to lose because of some girl with romantic notions. You're coming with me. Blackwood will have to choose land or wife. Either way, I win. His arrogance was his undoing. Just like Obadiah Fletcher, Rosa said quietly. You made him choose, too, didn't you? Rutledge's face twisted with contempt. Fletcher was a fool. Wouldn't sell, wouldn't negotiate. So I removed the problem. 3 bullets to the back of his head, and nobody did anything. Nobody will do anything now either. Rosa felt ice in her veins. He'd confessed. Said it out loud where witnesses could hear. She hoped to God they were listening. Rutledge stood, yanking Rosa up by her wrist. The small blade in her sleeve shifted. Ready? My horse is at the stable. We're leaving. If you scream, my men will kill whoever comes. Understood. Rosa didn't answer. She was calculating distance, angle, the placement of the blade. I said understood. 2 voices spoke simultaneously from different directions. We heard everything, Rutledge. Josiah stepped out from behind the boarding house, Winchester aimed at Rutledge's chest. From the opposite side, Zeke emerged from the alley, hunting knife in hand. Sheriff Calloway appeared from the general store entrance. Vanderbilt Rutledge, you're under arrest for the murder of Obadiah Fletcher and the attempted kidnapping of Rosa Blackwood. Rutledge's face went white, then red with fury. This is a setup, entrapment. It won't hold in court. You confessed to murder, Calloway said calmly. I heard it. So did Judge Whitmore watching from that window there. So did 3 other townspeople. You're done. Rutledge's hand moved toward his coat. Rosa saw the gun before anyone else. Josiah, she shoved the larger man aside just as Rutledge drew and fired. The bullet whistled past where Josiah's head had been a second before. Zeke moved like lightning. He closed the distance and tackled Rutledge to the ground in 3 seconds flat. The gun skittered away, but Rutledge was desperate. He grabbed Rosa's ankle as she moved past, trying to pull her down to use her as a shield. Rosa didn't think. She dropped to one knee, drew the small blade from her sleeve, and drove it through the back of Rutledge's hand, pinning it to the wooden boardwalk. Rutledge screamed. Blood welled around the blade. You little... Josiah's boot came down on Rutledge's wrist, not hard enough to break it, just hard enough to promise he could. Don't finish that sentence. Sheriff Calloway pulled Rutledge up and snapped iron cuffs on his wrists. You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it. As they dragged Rutledge toward the jail, he shouted back at them, I'll have lawyers. I'll be out in a week. You can't prove anything. But the fear in his voice said he knew better. Rosa stood trembling, adrenaline crashing through her system. Josiah pulled her against his chest, his heart hammering as hard as hers. You saved my life, he said quietly. You saved mine first. We're even. Zeke wrapped his arms around both of them. We need to get home. This isn't over yet. He was right. The arrest was just the beginning. The trial would determine everything. The next 2 months crawled by with agonizing slowness. Rutledge sat in jail, but his lawyers, expensive men from San Francisco, filed motion after motion. They tried to get the charges dismissed, tried to suppress the confession, tried to disqualify the witnesses. None of it worked, but it delayed the trial until mid-June, right up against the deadline for Josiah's homestead claim. Rosa rebuilt her workshop in the remains of the barn. She ordered new tools, new leather, new equipment. The work was slower, harder, but she refused to let Rutledge's fire destroy what she'd built. Orders still came. Her reputation had only grown. The woman who trapped the territory's most dangerous man was someone people wanted to do business with. In early April, Rosa noticed changes in her body. Morning sickness, tender breasts, exhaustion that sleep didn't cure. She waited another 2 weeks to be certain before telling Josiah and Zeke. They were mending fence in the north pasture when she rode out to them. I'm pregnant. Both men froze. Then Zeke let out a whoop of pure joy that echoed off the mountains. Josiah was more controlled, but Rosa saw his hands shake as he pulled her off the horse and into his arms. How far along? 6 weeks, maybe 7. The baby will come in November. Zeke's grin was enormous. Whose is it? Rosa looked between them. Does it matter? Not even a little, Josiah said. Baby's ours, all of ours. They rode back to the ranch together, making plans. They'd need to expand the cabin, build a proper nursery, prepare for winter with an infant. But first they had to win the trial. June 14th, 1878, the day before Josiah's homestead deadline. The territorial courthouse in Helena was packed, every seat filled, people standing in the aisles. This was the trial everyone had been waiting for, the rancher versus the robber baron. Judge Cornelius Whitmore presided, the same judge who'd married Rosa and Josiah 4 months earlier. He looked older now, wearied by what he'd learned about his territory. Rutledge's defense lawyer was a man named Thaddeus Pike. Expensive suit, Eastern education, ruthless reputation. He stood to make his opening statement. Gentlemen of the jury, this is a case about desperation. Josiah Blackwood is a desperate man about to lose his land. He needed a wife to keep his homestead claim. So he manufactured a bride, this girl Rosa Ashford. They concocted a scheme to trap my client Vanderbilt Rutledge, an upstanding businessman who only wanted to help a woman in distress. Pike pointed at Rosa sitting in the front row. This woman is not really Mrs. Blackwood. She is by all accounts the wife of both brothers, an arrangement that violates both law and decency. Can we trust the testimony of people engaged in such fraud? The prosecution rose. District Attorney Marcus Flynn was local Montana-born, and he knew how to speak to frontiersmen. Mr. Pike wants you to believe that Mr. Rutledge is a victim. Let's look at the facts. Obadiah Fletcher owned land. Mr. Rutledge wanted. Fletcher refused to sell. Fletcher died 3 bullets to the head. Rutledge bought the land cheap. Rosa Ashford was engaged to Fletcher. She came to Montana to marry him, found him dead. Rutledge tried to use her against the Blackwoods, and when that didn't work, he burned their barn and tried to kidnap her. We have witnesses. We have a confession. We have proof. The trial lasted 2 days. The prosecution presented Sheriff Calloway's testimony about hearing Rutledge's confession. Judge Whitmore confirmed it from his position at the window. 3 townspeople corroborated. They presented the gun used to kill Fletcher found in a search of Rutledge's office. Ballistics matched. They presented financial records showing Rutledge purchased Fletcher's land within days of his death for a fraction of its value. They presented testimony from one of Rutledge's men who turned informant describing in detail how Rutledge ordered the barn burned. The defense tried to discredit the witnesses, tried to prove the confession was coerced, tried to make the case about the Blackwoods' character instead of Rutledge's crimes. Pike called Rosa to the stand. Mrs. Blackwood, are you the wife of both Josiah and Ezekiel Blackwood? Rosa sat straight, composed. She'd prepared for this. I am legally married to Josiah Blackwood. Ezekiel is my brother-in-law. He lives with us on the ranch. Our private arrangements are not relevant to Vanderbilt Rutledge's crimes. But rumors are not evidence, Mr. Pike, but I have evidence. I heard Vanderbilt Rutledge confess to murdering Obadiah Fletcher. He said, and I quote, 3 bullets to the back of his head, and nobody did anything. That's not rumor. That's murder. Pike tried another angle. Isn't it true you married Josiah Blackwood purely to help him keep his homestead claim? I married Josiah Blackwood because he's a man of honor, because he values my strength instead of trying to diminish it, because he and his brother chose conscience over orders when it would have been easier to obey. And yes, because the marriage helps secure his land. Marriage is partnership. We help each other. That's not fraud. That's family. Pike called Josiah next. Mr. Blackwood, at Fort Defiance in 1877, you disobeyed direct military orders. Did you not? I did. You were ordered to fire on escaping prisoners and refused. Yes. So you're a man who doesn't follow rules, who makes his own law. How can this court trust you? Josiah looked directly at the jury. I was ordered to shoot unarmed women and children trying to escape a death camp. I refused because it was murder, not military necessity. If that makes me untrustworthy, then I accept that judgment. But I'd rather be untrustworthy than a murderer. Judge Whitmore spoke up, his voice cutting through the courtroom. The court recognizes that Mr. Blackwood's actions at Fort Defiance were morally courageous. Whatever his military record, it has no bearing on Mr. Rutledge's crimes. Move on, Mr. Pike. The defense had nothing left. On the morning of June 15th, the exact deadline for Josiah's homestead claim, Judge Whitmore delivered his verdict. The jury has deliberated and returned a verdict of guilty on all counts. Vanderbilt Rutledge, you are hereby convicted of first-degree murder in the death of Obadiah Fletcher, attempted kidnapping of Rosa Blackwood, arson, and conspiracy to defraud. I sentence you to death by hanging to be carried out 30 days from today. The courtroom erupted. Rutledge's face went sheet white. As to the matter of the homestead claim, Judge Whitmore continued, Josiah and Rosa Blackwood have a legal valid marriage. The homestead claim is hereby confirmed and made permanent. All challenges are dismissed with prejudice. Josiah reached for Rosa's hand. Zeke stood behind them, his hands on both their shoulders. They'd won. Everything. The land, their lives, their future. 1 month later, Rosa stood witness as Vanderbilt Rutledge was hanged in the Helena Town Square. She didn't watch out of vengeance. She watched for closure. For Obadiah Fletcher, who died before she could meet him. For her father's tools burned to nothing. For the peace of knowing the monster was gone. Rutledge's last words were defiant. You think you've won, but the frontier is dying. Civilization is coming. Men like you will disappear. Josiah, standing beside Rosa, spoke quietly. We don't disappear. We adapt. The trapdoor opened. Rutledge fell. It was over. They returned to Thunder Creek Ranch and began rebuilding in earnest. A new barn larger and better, an expanded cabin with a nursery, a proper workshop for Rosa with equipment that surpassed what she'd lost. The seasons turned. Summer brought green to the pastures and new foals to the horses. Fall painted the mountains gold and red. On November 3rd, 1878, Rosa went into labor. It lasted 20 hours. Brutal, exhausting, terrifying. But when she finally held her daughter, all of it became worthwhile. The baby had hair that gleamed somewhere between chestnut and auburn, depending on the light. Her eyes shifted between amber and whiskey. It was beautifully impossible to say which brother had fathered her. She belonged to both of them, to all of them. "What should we name her?" Rosa asked, exhausted but radiant. "Magnolia," Josiah said softly, "for new beginnings, for strength that grows in hard places." "Magnolia Rose Blackwood," Zeke added, "Nola for short." Rosa looked down at her daughter and felt something settle in her chest. Peace, completion, home. The years that followed were not without struggle. Montana winters were brutal. Drought came in 1880. A hard spring in 81 nearly destroyed the cattle. But the Blackwood family endured. In 1881, Rosa gave birth to twin boys, Thomas and Henry. Both healthy, both strong, both impossible to assign to one father or the other. Her saddle-making business thrived. Orders came from across the territory. She trained 3 apprentices, including a young woman named Magnolia Sharp, who'd arrived desperate and alone, just as Rosa once had. Rosa taught her the same lessons Ambrose had taught her. That precision mattered more than strength. That quality work was its own advertisement. That a woman's hands could create legacy. Thunder Creek Ranch grew to 1,200 acres, 50 head of cattle, 20 horses, buildings that would last generations. On a spring evening in 1888, 10 years after Rosa had arrived in Montana, as a desperate bride, the Blackwood family stood on the hill overlooking their land. Rosa was 31 now, Josiah 39, Zeke 36. 3 children played nearby, Nola 9 years old and already learning leatherwork, and the twins Thomas and Henry, 7 years old and inseparable. In the distance, a railroad train whistled. Civilization coming to Montana just as Rutledge had predicted before he died. Nola looked up at her mother. "Mama, do you ever regret coming to Montana?" Rosa thought about the girl she'd been. Terrified, alone, desperate. She thought about Obadiah Fletcher dead before she could meet him. She thought about the barn fire and the trial and all the hard years building something real. "Never," she said. "I came here as a bride with nothing, but I found something worth more than safety or comfort or any of the things I thought I needed. What? Myself and a family worthy of who I became." Josiah wrapped his arms around her from behind, his voice warm against her ear. "Still ours." Rosa smiled, leaning back into his strength. "Always. And you're mine. Both of you." Zeke's hand settled on her shoulder. "And these 3 children are ours, our legacy for this land." Far in the distance, the train whistled again. The frontier was changing, becoming something new. But the Blackwood family had survived worse than change. They'd survived violence and loss and the hardest Montana could throw at them. They would thrive in whatever came next. Because they'd learned the most important lesson the frontier could teach. Strength came not from standing alone, but from standing together. Love came not from following rules, but from building something real with people who saw you, all of you, and chose you anyway. Rosa had come to Montana territory as a widow before she was a bride, but she'd become something far greater. A wife, a mother, a craftsman, a woman who'd helped build an empire from frozen ground and refused to be broken by anything the world could throw at her. This was home. This was family. This was everything she'd never known she needed, and it was absolutely perfect. The sun set over Thunder Creek Ranch, painting the mountains in shades of gold and crimson, and the Blackwood family stood together, watching the day end and tomorrow begin. They had won their war. They had claimed their land. They had built their legacy, and it would last for generations.